Senator from California.
Mr. President, elections are the bedrock of our American democracy. And despite what the president and his big circle of election-denying conspiracy theorists would have Americans believe, the truth is that our elections are indeed free. Our elections are indeed fair, and our elections are indeed secure. That's why the revamped, new and made worse SAVE Act, passed by the House last night and designed to compel states to give over to Donald Trump their voter rolls, is not just a solution in search of a problem, it's a very bad solution at that. This bill is built on a myth rooted in the big lie of election denial that has poisoned our democracy for years. That supposed non-citizen voter fraud occurs with any meaningful frequency. It's the same big lie that's still being perpetrated by Kurt Olson, the president's Stop the Steal lawyer, who is now working in the White House, and that was President and is now President Trump's decision to send the Director of National Intelligence to Fulton County, Georgia, late last month to seize paper ballots from the 2020 election. Ballots that have already been counted at least 3 times in 3 different ways, all reaching the same election outcome. The fact of the matter is that audit after audit and investigation after investigation in red states and in blue states have all reached the same conclusion. That voting by non-citizens, which by the way is already a felony, is so exceedingly rare that it is statistically almost non-existent. Which tells us something very important, though. It means our current laws are working. So we don't need new documentation requirements like passports and birth certificates. By the way, 21 million Americans cannot readily access these documents. We shouldn't be risking the disenfranchisement of 69 million American women who have changed their names from what's printed on their birth certificates, most of whom made that change when they got married. And we don't need to force approximately 60 million Americans who live in rural communities to drive up to hundreds of miles to prove their eligibility in person, because that's not election security. It's actually voter suppression. But it's important for the American people to understand what this Republican effort to jam the SAVE Act, as they call it, through isn't happening in isolation. There's a bigger picture here. This bill is part of a broader effort by Trump and his Republican enablers to lay the groundwork for the rigging of upcoming elections, including the midterms this November. Now, November might seem like a long way off, but the midterms have already begun. Primary ballots have been mailed out in many jurisdictions, and the first round of early voting begins today in some jurisdictions. And it's pretty clear which way the political winds are blowing. The American people are rightly frustrated by Donald Trump's failed economic policies that are raising costs for working families. And the American people are increasingly outraged by the cruel, violent mass deportation campaign unfolding in communities across the country, which has already cost 2 innocent American citizens their lives. It seems to me that the SAVE Act is really only intended to save Republicans and Trump from facing the consequences of their failed policies. But rather than change their policies, Republicans would rather change the election rules. How many times have we heard the president openly question our election system and why the federal government shouldn't run elections? At one point he said, and I'll quote, "If you think about it, the state is an agent for the federal government in elections." I don't know why the federal government doesn't do them anyway. End quote. Well, let me answer that question for the president. It's real simple. It's because the Constitution says otherwise. The Constitution clearly entrusts elections to the states and to Congress, not to the president. But those efforts to interfere are underway and ongoing. We've seen the Department of Justice sue 24 states that happen to be led by Democrats, targeting their voter rolls, in addition to the intimidation and strong-arm tactics. We also know that Donald Trump says he regrets not issuing an executive order in his first term directing the military to illegally seize voting machines. He's not shy about this, folks. He thinks he has a Department of Homeland Security now more willing to carry out such illegal actions this time around. And so, yes, the threat is real. Or consider his former White House advisor, who's called on the president to deploy ICE to intimidate U.S. citizens trying to vote this November. So let's be absolutely clear. That is already illegal. Armed federal agents at polling locations is voter intimidation and has no place in our democracy. Think about that. Think about that. Using federal force to intimidate voters at the polls? It's hard to imagine anything more un-American. And so that's why today, colleagues, I'm announcing a new amendment to the Department of Homeland Security funding bill that's still being negotiated and deliberated, an amendment to explicitly bar any federal funds from being used to deploy federal law enforcement or military personnel to polling places or election offices for the purpose of voter intimidation or election interference. It's amazing we even have to say that. It's amazing that we even have to think about addressing that. But that's what the president wants. Now, don't put him past him to try. So it's time to send the administration a clear message that in the United States of by force. And colleagues, we as a Congress have a responsibility to act to protect the elections entrusted by the Constitution to us and to the states before it's too late. We have a responsibility to reject this SAVE Act, to keep federal law enforcement away from polling locations, and to make clear once and for all that elections and our sacred right to the ballot box belongs to the people. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield back.